Hello and welcome to the Music Survival Guide, the independent musician's guide for how to survive in the music industry. My name's Phil, a mixing engineer. So, this week on the podcast, I have an interview with John, who runs the Forge Music Group. If you've been anywhere around the new wave of classic rock group or any sort of modern rock area, it's hard to miss them. They've got a big presence on the scene, but I think with good reason. John has a fountain of knowledge to share with you all about being in a band, about promotion, about how to push yourself forward, keeping goals, all sorts of things. I'm going to stop wittering on and let him tell you about it. So on we go with the episode. So today on the podcast, I'm joined by Craig, who is I'm going to say the owner, but we may come to that, of Forge Music Group. How are you?
I'm fine, Phil. Yourself?
I'm very well. Yes.
It's actually John, my name. It's back to...
Yes. I kind of realised that as soon as I said it.
I put it, but to be fair, that's because I reversed my name on social media. And intentionally, I hasten to add, so more people than not call me Craig, but my actual name is John.
I've learned something. Today. John, hello.
Yeah, right, buddy.
So, my first question for you, as I tend to do, is from a random question generator. And my random question for you this week is, what's the last book that you gave up on and stopped reading?
Do you know what? I don't think I ever have. I'm an avid reader. I would say that there's books that I've finished that I didn't really enjoy and wish I hadn't read, but there's just something in me that won't allow me to quit. Yeah, I can't actually... And honestly, even books that I say I don't enjoy, there's bits of them, there's information in them that I do like, so I tend never to give up. I can't remember. Maybe at school, but that's a long time ago for me. But no, I always finish them.
There's one book that I've given up on. One. And I felt so bad about it. And it was The Picture of Dorian Gray. I could not stand it. It was so boring.
Was it?
But yeah, no, just interminable. Anyway, that's by the by. So my first real question for you is, how did you get into music? How did you get into the music that you now enjoy?
Well, obviously it started seeing bands, listening to bands when I was in my formative years. So I grew up and in my mum and dad's house, my dad was always listening to country music. So it was like Hank Williams, Hank Snow, Jim Reeves, things like that. So I kind of always listened to it. My mum tended to listen to like radio shows, so it'd be like Junior Choice on a Saturday morning and BBC Radio 1 and things like that. So I tended to just pick up, but I never paid any attention to it. Really, it was just I liked it, but it wasn't a thing. And then when I got to about 12, I think it was, I had three cousins that were all a bit older than me, but the eldest one was 5 years older than me. So at that time, he was 17 working. He got himself a stereo and he started bringing in records. And, it was Led Zeppelin. It was Black Sabbath. It was Jethro Tull, Uriah Heep. And then the main band that hooked me right at the start was The Who. And when I started listening to that, that's when, all my friends at school were talking about the glam bands and sort of like Bay City Rollers and stuff like that. But I was always like into the heavier stuff. So I had this mix of country music and, which I still love, and the heavy stuff. And then once I got to sort of like 16, when I was working myself and I could actually buy music, that was just in 77. So that's when punk was out. So I started going to see the Sex Pistols and Sham 69, all those kind of bands as well. But I always maintained that love for like Rainbow. Rainbow was the first band that I discovered for myself that I just thought were absolutely fantastic. And that's kind of it. And then in 1978, I started singing in a band with three mates. We got a band together. Quite funny actually, because two of them were into AC/DC and Status Quo, and 2 years were punks. So we used to do two sets, one with punk music and one with AC/DC and Status Quo. It must have blown people's minds. But and then all the way through the 80s, I was in originals bands, so original rock bands, and I quit in 1990 when I moved to England, and I gave up on it all then.
You decided enough was enough with music?
Well, I moved down and I didn't really know anybody down here, and there was so many other things to do with work and stuff like that, and I played rugby league as well when I was down, so I just didn't have the time for it anymore.
I mean, I've got to ask, since you've mentioned seeing bands like the Sex Pistols, and these are bands that I'd have loved to have seen at the time. What, in your opinion, is the best gig that you have ever been to?
Oh,
Haha, might be a hard question.
do you know what? I couldn't. The first band that I ever went to see live takes a bit of beating, and that was Thin Lizzy. And they play. It was the Live and Dangerous tour, 1978. The Apollo Glasgow, which was the best venue I've ever been to in my life. The atmosphere was amazing, and I think that would probably be hard to beat. But they're all good for different reasons, you know. I mean, one of my favourite bands now, and I've seen them live, and you'll laugh at me, I'm quite sure, but it's the Script. But it's the atmosphere they create, and musically they're fantastic, you know, live. So I think I've only ever been to one gig and walked out of it, and that was when I went to see Delamitri in the mid-80s, and I expected them to be good, but I just found that, whether it was me or whether it was them, I don't know, or a bit of both, but they were just boring. So they were the only one that I didn't actually enjoy. Yeah, it was amazing going to see the likes of the Damned, going to see the Stranglers. Actually, the Stranglers were something else. It was after they'd been banned for like a year in Britain, and they had everybody there watching them to make sure they never put a foot wrong. So they brought on a stripper for Nice and Sleazy with all the counsellors with it. It was hilarious. Oh, it was different times. It was fantastic times, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have loved to have seen. So my mum's seen Thin Lizzy. She saw Thin Lizzy at the time. She's also seen Queen, and those are two bands that I'd have killed to have seen live.
I never saw Queen, actually. As much as I liked them, I never saw them live. But I also saw Phil Lynott and his last band, Grand Slam, and they were amazing live as well.
So how did Forge Music Group come into being? Or was it something else first? Or
it was, what actually happened was, I had been in the military, reserve forces, for quite a period of time, sort of like 16 years. Everything that I did for the last 16 years was with the Army Cadet Force. So I came out in summer of 2018, when I moved over from West Yorkshire to Liverpool. And it was kind of like I was looking for something else to do, because that used to take up so much of my time. It was amazing how much time it took. And I discovered on Facebook that a guy that had been in bands with me up in Ayr in Scotland, where I come from, in the early 80s, a guy called Brian, who had moved to Manchester, and he was actually in a band, and the band were called Mouth in the South. And, I started paying attention, chatting to him, listening to the music. I liked the music. But I noticed that they never seemed to be gigging anywhere, and I couldn't understand it, when, to my ears, they sounded like a good band. So I kind of asked him, why are you struggling? They said, and his first words to me were, why do you want to help? And so that's where it started. So in order to give myself a bit of legitimacy, for the sake of Mouth in the South, who are now called Fiefdom, by the way, same band, but it's just a rename. So basically I started, and so I created Forge AMP, which was Artist Management and Promotions.
Oh, I didn't know that.
When I first started, just because it was AMP, and I thought it sounded good for a music thing, but I got the AMP idea first, and then had to try and create something that fitted around it. But that's where Forge AMP came. It was to try and give legitimacy for the sake of the guys, really. And then another band approached Piers, who's a singer with Fiefdom now, and said, we're looking for a manager. So he told them to talk to me, and the next thing I knew, I had 2 bands, then I had 3, then I had 4 that was one, then it was 5, and then it got ridiculous. But it was only really a year ago, just over a year ago, when lockdown came, because before that I was a freelance salesman. So selling German and Italian kitchens to kitchen retailers, and you can imagine what happened when lockdown came, and then it was just devastating. So there was nothing. So I decided to put my time into the music, because the music had always just been a hobby, a time-consuming hobby, but a hobby. And it was one of those sort of things where I couldn't do anything for about 6 weeks. So I found that the more I put into the music, the more I was getting out of it, and the more opportunities there were. So I decided, after talking to my partner Nikki, and she helped me to come to the decision, which was like, you know what, let's give this a go, let's go full time on it. And so in order to give it a legitimacy, I created the Forge Music Group, I'm a sole trader, so that's the umbrella company. And from that you have Forge AMP, Forge Ahead Initiative, Forge and Fire Promotions, and obviously anything else that we bring out. So it's the actual trading arm. The rest are just market names, really.
So what do the various sub groups, for want of a better phrase? What do they do? How do they differ from each other?
Well, Forge AMP are the original. So what they are is a management company. Basically, the bands that are signed to us, which is about 25 of them that we work with, and that's where we actually work closely with them and manage them and promote them. The Forge Ahead initiative is a young band mentoring program. So it's where we decided, myself and some colleagues that's within the group, decided to try and give something back to young musicians, and we don't charge them for it. So basically we try and steer them through the pitfalls that can become a problem for any band, but especially for young bands, and just try and help them get up the ladder. And that runs for a year. So this is the first one, just started the 1st of April. So it's basically a mentoring program. Then Forge and Fire Promotions is the promotions arm for the Forge Music Group. So it actually initially started not because I wanted to become a promoter, but simply because I kept coming up against brick walls with the bands that I had at the time. And if they were given a chance, they were either getting hardly any money or they were travelling all over the country and playing to nobody, because a lot of these promoters were very amateur, didn't care, and the better ones weren't really giving us a chance at the time. So I kind of went into it just because I thought nobody's going to care about my bands more than I do. So if I start my own promotions arm, then we can be in control of every aspect of it. And that's really what it was. It was kind of reluctantly done, but it was a good thing that we did. And then, of course, we just started. Then the lockdown came. So, but we've got lots going just now. But then we've also got the Scouser and the Scot, which you've been on.
I have.
Which is myself and Ian. But that's part of this next gen rock project that we've got going. You know, helping bands. So it's kind of part of Forge Ahead as well. And then obviously I've got my radio show, Forge, Hot from the Forge, which again showcases our bands plus other grassroots, which again is a next gen thing. And now I'm going to give you a scoop. I can tell you that we are going to start our own record label as well.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's the next logical step. So
Yeah, it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's kind of at the very formative stages, but it's going to be for our bands. You know, we're not using it for any other bands. It's again, it's a bit like Forge and Fire. It's where I think we can add value to our own bands and offer them a service that other people won't do. And certainly in the market and promotion side of it as well. So, yeah, so that's what we are going to be doing.
Exciting. I've got to ask. So in 2018, you went from enjoying music, sure, but not really having much to do with sort of bands and touring and promotions and all that, to this, which is quite a long way to come in 3 years or so. Has it been a steep learning curve, or how's that been like?
It was horrendous to start with. Much as I enjoyed it, my background, my full-time employment was nearly always in sales and marketing. So I knew how to find customers. I knew how to, approach people. I knew how to do all of that. But the one thing that first of all, I didn't really know what a manager should have been doing. Because what I found out was that when you're trying to get bands gigs, that's more a booker's job. So initially, I was lucky because the bands that I was working with were at a lower level, so they could, and I could, take my time to try and learn it. But I always remember, again, Piers from Fiefdom saying to me right at the start, the one thing you've got to understand, John, is that this industry isn't like the industries you're used to. He said there's a lot of egos out there. There's a lot of self-serving people. There's a lot of people living off the back of people's dreams, which is true because you don't really get that, when you've got a product you're selling normally. So it kind of made me realise that, it is a different market. It probably took me 9 months to a year to actually get to grips with that aspect. And then the hardest bit is finding out the people you shouldn't be dealing with and finding the people you should. And I'm lucky now that I've got, well, it wasn't just luck. It was a lot of it was because of the messages I was putting out, and they liked them, and I was watching what they were saying, and I liked what they were saying. So there's a network of us now that kind of work together to try and benefit the bands. One thing we all have is we're all fans of music. We're all music fans. None of us are ever going to get rich off of doing this. I'll tell you that now. It's no chance, and that's not even an aspect for me. It is just literally about trying to do the best we can for the bands to try and keep them away from the cuckoos in the nest, the ones who live off their dreams. And I'll be that up front. They do, and they get away with it, and they've been getting away with it for years, well, decades really. But that's what it's all about, and yeah, it has been a steep learning curve, and I've learned more in the last year since going full time, because when it's your job and it's, you know, a lot of hours, 7 days a week, really, and especially during lockdown, you know, what else was there to do? So, you know, I've learned such a lot, and I've made a lot of good contacts, and I've discovered a lot of good stuff, and we're constantly shaping what we're doing. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but I don't regret any of it, even the mistakes.
I mean, that's something where you and I very much are, I guess, in alignment. That, to me, the entire reason I mix at all, and the entire reason that, for example, this podcast exists and things like that, is to serve people in bands and to help them get ahead and make progress, whatever that looks like for them. And yeah, that's kind of my real main aim, to be honest. That's kind of what I enjoy. And that does come out of a love of the music that I work with and the music that I listen to as well.
I can't think of anything. I turned 60 yesterday, so I've been around for a while. And I can't think of anything that can do as much for your soul, your psyche, as music can. You know, that feeling. And I think that I'm starting to sound dead philosophical here. I'm scaring myself. And I'd just like to hasten to add, I've not been drinking either. But yeah, it's just that, isn't it? It's like being in a venue, or, you know, I've done it. I've been up on the stage. I've been stood at the back of the hall. I've been stood at the front, and there's just nothing like it. And, you know, even with me with my radio show, when bands send me their new tracks and I hear them and I play them. I mean, I listen to my own show twice a week because I love the music. You know, I can even put up with my own voice just to hear the music again, and that's just something that I think, you know, you can't put a price on that, really.
So, when it comes to the management side of things, do you approach bands or do they approach you for management? How does that kind of thing work?
There's been very few bands that I've approached, mainly because probably it was like I lacked the confidence that I would go to them. There was a couple that I actively pursued by being supportive of them, if you like, you know, what they were putting out there, and they noticed it. But I can't think of anybody that I actively went after. It's kind of happened the other way, because they've seen what I've been doing. They've seen the stuff that I put out in social media. They see that, especially in the last year, everything I've put out has been positive. And also, being honest with you, one of the things they know about me is that I don't lie. And if they come to me and say, can you get us up to this stage, I'll say no. You know, do you know the people that run? And if I don't know them, I'll just say no. I can't guarantee anything other than I will do my best to help you to get to where you want to be. And so therefore, they like that. And the other thing that some of them that's joined me in the last 6 months is they like the fact that I quite openly back bands. So if I find people out there in the industry that are quite clearly ripping people off or not being upfront, I will name and shame them.
I've seen your Facebook posts about such things, yes.
and to be fair, that was for no reason other than I just can't stand that kind of thing anyway. But so it was never a ploy, but I've had some bands come to me and say, do you know what? Just the simple fact that you'll stand up and say it. You know, and even if these people are connected and behind the scenes are saying don't use any of his bands, they're still willing to come with me because they know that I will find a way of getting around just about anything.
Determined, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, one of my favourite stories, I mean, whether you're a believer in Christ or anything like that, or whether you don't, or you just know the story, but one of my favourite stories is in the Bible, when you're talking about books, and it's the bit where they're trying to get some people are trying to get a crippled guy to see Jesus because they think that if Jesus touched him, he's going to be cured. So they can't get in the front door because of the queues, they can't get in the back door because of the queues, they couldn't even get him in the window. So they climbed up onto the roof, dug a hole in the roof and lowered them down in front of them. And that's my approach.
Just at any cost getting to the goal.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. And that's it. If I believe in something enough, then I'll do what I can to get around that. So therefore, I know it's a long-winded answer, but it's a way of just me saying to people, if a band comes to me, first of all, I'll listen to them, but we need to share the same ideas. I need to like their music, because if I don't like their music, my heart's not in it, and I just say no to them. But I also need to be clear in what they want, and they need to be clear in what I'm able to do. But I'm always 100% truthful in what I can and can't do.
So if a band were listening to this podcast and they were liking what you were saying and they were interested in the idea of working with you, you wouldn't kind of be out and out saying no if they approached you from this?
There's been a lot of bands that I've said no to because either I didn't like their music or I didn't feel I could help them. Because that's another thing. If it's a genre I don't know anything about, I don't have connections in, then there's no point in me taking them on. There'll be better people out there. But there are plenty of bands that I talk to regularly that aren't our bands who I help guide, give them advice. They'll come to me about advice, because they know I'm not going to work with them, but they trust me enough to run ideas past me. So yeah, I'll help anybody. I mean, that's why we do the Scouser and the Scot, and for that reason. But yeah, even if a band doesn't want management, but if an idea, or I'm constantly getting things sent to me. What do you think of this song, or what do you think of that song? And the one thing I would say to anybody listening is I'm brutally honest. So if you hear things like it sounds like it's been mixed with a Kenwood chef, then or the sound quality is like having your head stuck up a dead bear's rear end, that's I will say things like that, unfortunately. But then I'm always constructive as well, because I'll say that's a great song, but it needs this doing, or it needs that doing. And if I think something's right, is good, but I can't quite get it, I'll also share it with other people that I trust and let them have a listen to it. Because there's some bands that we work with it's my colleagues that work with them on a day-to-day basis, because I think they're a better fit.
So if a band were starting fresh today, they have got together and they've had a few rehearsals and they've got some songs, what kinds of things do you think that they should do in order to promote themselves and to get out there and get the ball rolling?
Well, first of all, they've got to understand that this is called the music business for a reason. It's a business. No matter whether they think they're the best thing since sliced bread, it's what you do with it. So the first things first is make sure that if you're going to be approaching bookers, promoters, because let's face it, it's gigs you want to start with, then you do it in a professional way. You find out who you want to go to and you write an EPK, an electronic press kit. Make sure that's interesting as well. Don't go for the generic rubbish that we hear that I get all the time. It's boring. Really work out who you are as a band. Work out who your potential audience are. And don't just say everybody. If you think we're this type of band and I think these big bands fans might like us, then look at how they package things. Look at how they target people and emulate it. Put things out. Make sure you've got the image right. Make sure you know who you are and who your target audience is, and then make sure you do everything to hit those, to get them and to reach them in the way that they need to be reached. So I'll give you an example. There's no point being in TikTok if you're playing Southern rock and your target audience is 55-year-old men and upwards. Don't go on TikTok. Facebook's the one for that, even with all its problems. So that's just an example, you know what I mean? But if you're a young or you're a hit band that's got a great image and you think your music is going to be there for the 15-year-olds and upwards, then TikTok is a way. But then again, you need to understand what you're doing with that. So it's all about how you package things. But first and foremost, it's about making sure the product you have is right. Does your music sound good? Is it exciting?
Yeah, and that's the difficult bit, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. It's all about music, because if the music's rubbish, there's not many really bad bands make it. There's a few over the years, but that's with marketing. But you really need to concentrate on the music and don't be in a rush to just go out and gig. Make sure you've got the show. Make sure you only need 30 minutes to start with, maybe 40 at the most, and make sure that if you've been playing for 2-3 years and you've not done a gig yet, make sure that you've got 6 to 8 really the best songs that you've got. Don't just play the very first one you wrote because you've wrote the very first one. If the new songs are better, just think about it from the perspective of the customer's perspective. What is the customer going to think of that? What is the person stood in front of you looking back at you going to think about that? And that's the approach I would say. But the main thing is always be professional. You should see some of the emails that I get. Yo, mate, I think we're a really good band that would like to work with you. That's not the way to go. Send me something that I can click on and go, yep, there's the social media links, there's their music, there's some MP3s if they've not even got them out on Spotify, there's some recordings. Just think about it. Don't be stupid about it.
And the other thing I always think when it comes to writing a professional email is, especially if you're writing to, say, a potential venue who you could play at, is you want to make everything as easy as humanly possible to find. So your music needs to be easy to find, and your photos need to be easy to find, and everything. It doesn't need to be kind of hidden away.
Everybody's busy nowadays. So anybody that thinks, it's just they've been lazy, it's nothing to do with that. We're really, really busy people. Or anyway, the people that are good at it are really busy. If you can get straight through to people, then you start to wonder, or you should be wondering what you're doing. But we're all busy people, so if you make it easy for us, so I can just get it. I mean, there was one band, in the last we signed in the last 6 months, it's Circus 66, and they sent me an email, properly worded, and there was a document on there, and when I clicked, and it just went videos, clicked on it, the videos were there, electronic press kit, clicked on that, it was a video of them talking about their band, the individuals, the band themselves, what it meant to them. Another one which was the Spotify playlist. Next one, and it was just so easy. And within the space of half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, I was sitting there going, I love this band. Because they made it easy, they presented themselves properly, and I could get everything in easy reach, of what I needed to hear about them. And then it was just a case of going back to them and saying, love this. I definitely want to talk to you guys, and the rest to say is history because we're now working with them.
Another thing that I've noticed, which is a kind of similar thing, which you might have some thoughts about, is are there any ways that you've noticed that bands could improve their social media with? Yeah,
definitely. The thing is that you've got to understand, right? I'm not going to get into the mechanics of algorithms and all that because, quite frankly, it bores me, and I've got a low boredom threshold. So I have people that understand all that, okay? All I know is that Facebook isn't as good as it used to be for reaching people because they're trying to push you down the way of having to pay for everything. So I understand that. But if your target audience is 40-year-old people and upwards, then Facebook is still very, very, very prevalent within that age group. So... and it's kind of like Instagram is slightly younger, and then TikTok's the youngest, obviously. But you've got to understand what works in each one, and you can't just put the same thing across all the platforms. So I'll give you an example of TikTok. If you wanted to play some of your music, then it's much better to play the music in the background with something funny in the foreground, so that the music almost becomes the hook. But it's what you're doing in front. And if you can get people to go, that's great, we're going to use that song and copy it, and do something funny with it or something interesting. One of the recent ones was Where Is the Love with Black Eyed Peas, and it was people literally creeping up on other people and scaring them. But it went massive, So it's about that. If it's Instagram, you need to think about the age group of the people that use that and aim what you're doing at it. Facebook is much more... and YouTube's another one. YouTube, I mean, people think YouTube's the answer, and it can be, but you've got to understand one of the things is that unless what you're putting on there is at least 10 minutes long, YouTube doesn't even find it. They will not suggest you to anybody. People will only find you if they actively look for you. So it's get somebody that can tell you all about it and point you. I mean, I've recently taken on a guy for the Fuzz Music Group. It's a guy called Matt Nathan. And Matt has his own studio. He makes videos and all that. He's a very knowledgeable guy about social media and about creating videos, music videos. He's a musician himself as well. And he's our artistic director because, quite frankly, it's so important nowadays to get that right. His job is to guide our bands. And he's working with one just now, Carabella, a band from Kent, who are very visual, perfect for TikTok, quirky. And he's working with them on how they present things across the different mediums, and it's that important. So, but if you're not at the stage where you do that, just think about it from the perspective of who's likely to watch this, what are they like. If you go on TikTok and see what people are watching on there, then you need to try and adapt what you're putting out to fit in with that, because if you just go out there with a boring video, this is us in the studio, that's not going to get picked up by anybody on TikTok. That's all right for Facebook. But it's that. And take it seriously, because quite frankly, if you are putting out something that doesn't stay on message, or it's stupid, unless you're a band that lives in things like that, where that's actually part of the charm, they're a bit out there and etc. You can do that. But, think about it. If you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and if that's the first thing that they've seen of you, it might just switch them off you for life. And you've got to be aware of that.
Or it could turn the person on, depending on the approach that the bands have taken, I guess.
Yeah. And again, that's where if you know who your target audience is. So let's say you're a band that you think you're people that like Clutch, for example, or Tool. You're going to appeal to that kind of fan. Then look at how they do things and take that as an example. If you're a thrash metal band, look at how the most successful thrash metal bands are reaching out to their customers, their fans. In fact, I call them customers because at the end of the day, you're relying on them to make you money. And they are customers. They're not just fans. You have to remember that. So it's all about that, really. It's just about really thinking it through. And here's one I would like to say before I finish on this subject. One of the things that we've learned about every band seems to think now if they put a song out for radio, they then have to create or release it on Spotify or whatever, the other platforms, that they have to put a video out. You don't. Because quite frankly, if you can't afford to do a video and create a video that's as good as the song that you've put out, then don't do it, because you're cheapening it. And these lyric videos, so many of them, people are using them because they're cheaper. They're not that cheap, but they're cheaper than, say, going out and doing a storyboard one. But the thing is the first thing I do when somebody sends it to me, I watch it with the sound turned off. And if it's not engaging as a visual piece, then it's not doing its job. It's actually it's cheapening the track. And that's something that I've found, and it's something I'm passionate about now. So I'd rather a band, if they can only afford one good video in 6 months, then pick the song that lends itself best to it. Spend the money, whether that song is your best song or the most commercial one, or it's just the best one for a storyboard, then put the money into that rather than thinning it out and putting it across 3 different songs, for example.
I think it's one of those things that actually, to my mind, swings both ways, in that if your song sounds phenomenal but it looks terrible, that is awful. But then at the same time, if it looks phenomenal but sounds like it's been recorded on a potato, then you're going to be in a similar situation where they don't match each other. Yeah,
100%. I didn't go for that because obviously I was assuming that anybody that was going to go to put a video out, they would made sure that the soundtrack that the actual sound was good. But yeah, you're right, you're spot on. I've seen that as well. Where you go, that video is great, but my God, that who's mixed that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting problem sometimes that I've seen. So, what are some mistakes that you've seen in the way that bands organise themselves and kind of in the way that they run?
I think the biggest thing that tends to happen with any band is there's usually, no matter how many people's in the band, there's always one person that seems to do everything. And whether that's because they're a control freak or it's just everybody else thinks their job is to simply turn up and play music and play the tracks and write songs, then that will fail because it's too much. Even if somebody's the most willing person in the world to do everything, they will fail quite simply because there's too many things to do. So the big mistake I think with bands is they don't share the load. So, for example, if somebody's got an interest in one aspect, so let's say they're actually really good at social media, then just because they may not be the main songwriter doesn't mean to say they couldn't do a great job for you in social media. But you tend to find the person that writes the songs or the singer thinks that they can do everything. And I'm saying that as an ex-lead vocalist, so I'm nothing against singers. It's just a reality. I can just picture myself if I was doing it now, I'd be a right pain. But it's that. So that's a big mistake. And the other thing is as well is that they don't take time to really plan the route through. So they'll just play gigs in the local town and they think they're being successful if all their mates come to see them and they can fill 150 max capacity venue and they keep playing there, but then they don't, and then they'll go, well, can you give me a gig in Bristol? Wait a minute, you're in Leeds. Yeah, and we want to be headliners or we're wanting 150 quid, but nobody knows you down here, and that's the thing. That they just don't plan it out. They just kind of think it's enough to have an image, have some songs, be able to put on a show, and that's it. It needs to be much more planned. I know it sounds boring, but as we used to say in the military, fail to prepare, prepare to fail, and that's the same in business, and it's the same in this.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent. I've actually mentioned it on the podcast before. A little advert for one of my previous episodes, that having a plan, like a 6 months to a year long plan for every year in that case, is a great thing to do. And then you can have some goals, and then at the end of the year you can set some new goals based on your old ones, and that kind of strategizing what you're doing is a really great way to go about it.
Yeah, and you need to put in your key performance indicators. What will success at that level, how do you know you've reached that goal? How are you going to measure it? And if it's like, I want to have played in 8 different cities across the UK, yes, we've achieved it, but why do you want to play across 8 cities? To build a fan base. So you played in 8 cities. What was the total amount of people that saw you? About 200. Well, have you gained any more there? Really? Is that a good plan? How much did it cost you? It cost us £2,000 to do that. It's kind of that. It's, you really need to think it through. I know nobody picks up an instrument and wants to be in a rock and roll band to be in business. But even at the most basic level, you need to think about it that way, or else you're just another band that will play to their mates and disappear. And I know, because I've been in them kind of bands back in the day when we didn't know enough about this kind of thing, and nobody would tell you.
It's a difficult thing for a lot of people in bands, isn't it? Which is, I guess, why people such as yourselves exist, so that you can help bands to progress in those kinds of areas and really make solid choices. Yeah,
that's it. And there's enough of us about that care, and advice. Advice is there. There's plenty. In fact, it's easier now if you just take the time. It's all on YouTube. It's all in podcasts. There's loads of information. Just find it. You just need to, put in your search engine what you're looking for, and it'll come up. So what I'm saying here is it's no black magic. You know what I mean? It's no hidden secrets. It's no secret elixir. It's just experience and common sense. But there's lots of people I listened to one today that Brad Marr put out, a podcast about why rock music's failing, because it's not moving with the times. And I sat and I listened to it tonight, not long ago, and I thought, he's nail on the head. And he's even that makes me think about what I'm doing with Ford's Music Group. And I'll guarantee I will alter what I'm doing now because of some of the things he said there. And similarly, when I talk to people in Scouser and the Scot, we're always learning. It's funny because if you watch any of us, you'll see Ian's constantly scribbling stuff down. Because Ian obviously is in a band himself. He's in King Voodoo, a great band. And but and afterwards he'll say to me, I never thought about it that way. And I says, you know what, Ian? We're doing what we're supposed to do with this because we're learning as well, and you're never too late to learn.
That's absolutely right. It's never too late to learn. It doesn't matter whether you're 18 and you've started your first band, or you're 65 and you're in your 5th band. Keep learning. There's always stuff to find out.
And it's like, guys, we're Forge Ahead initiative. One of our bands is Sons of Liberty. And Sons of Liberty are all in their 60s, I think. Certainly most of them are. And they are they plan everything really, really well. They're a great band for planning themselves, you know. They get themselves around. They're very serious about what they do. But you get the likes of the guys that are there, Fred, and he had a seminar with all our young bands that's in the Forge Ahead initiative, talking about all these things. So there's plenty of people out there that if you look at them on social media and you like what you see, approach them. The other bands, etc. as well. You know, if you're a kind of in that genre, or you like, or they seem to be, ask them. Most of them will help you out.
What is your favourite thing about what you do? And that might be a hard question, I don't know.
I think there's no one thing. I enjoy working with the people that work with me. And I get up every morning and I look forward to the day. And at the end of the day, I look back at what I've done. Quite often I can't even say, my fiancé will say to me, what did you do today? And it was loads of little things, but all added up to nothing really. You think, in the great scheme of things, or you started with a list that's not going down, but you've been busy as hell all day. But I still got a buzz out of it, and I think that's it really. You know, it's in its formative years really. The Forge Music Group's only a year old as an entity, so I think their best times are ahead. Well, I know our best times are ahead of us. But I'll tell you what it is. It's every time I see somebody in social media talking about one of our bands and liking the music, or I play it in the radio show or played in somebody else's radio show and people are raving about it. And why do we not know about this band? We did a little feature in the New Wave of Classic Rock Webfest 4, and we were the first 45 minutes, and it was 6 of our bands. And I always remember at the end of it, I think it was Richard Brindley just looked at the camera and went, well, who knew? And then he says, well, actually, I assume Forge Music Group knew, or Forge AMP knew, but who else knew? And that was it, because he was taken aback by what he was hearing, because these bands that I picked weren't our best known bands. They were picked strategically. Actually, they were picked because of where it was being recorded, so they were all fairly local to that, the Chesterfield area, so they're all within easy reach. But, you know, it's when you hear people say that, and you see people writing it, and you see people go, I can't wait for you to come, you know, like Blitz. They've done so well in the last year during lockdown that everybody's clamouring to hear them now, and they brought out the best album of 2020 as far as I'm concerned. And I know I might be slightly biased, but when was the last time you heard an album where every single track could have been a single? And that, you know, and that's what it's about. It's about that. It's just about, and every time I get a message for somebody going, or somebody sends me a rough demo and says, what do you think of this song? And I'm like, oh mate, that's brilliant. That's what it is. But it's every day getting up and going, yes, let's go, let's do this.
So what has been your personal highlight out of everything that Forge Music Group has achieved so far? Again, probably might be quite a difficult question.
It's that people now seem to trust us. And people, and you know, I don't mean that people we work with, but people are coming to us, bands are coming to us because they've talked to other bands or they like what we say. And it's even people like, you know, everybody that's involved with emerging rock bands, New Wave of Classic Rock, you know, the Real Unknown Scene, all these guys, Crazy Cowboy, you know, Alec McKechnie, Lee at Push, I can't remember the name, sorry Lee, but Lee Graham, and people like that. All the ones that I, like Keith at WDFD, you know, Sean at KOL, all these guys now I can literally message, or they'll message me, and we'll help each other out because we're all in it for the right reasons. We're all in it because we love music. And from my personal perspective, I enjoy that as much as anything. The fact that I truly believe that we can work together and make a big difference and change things. Because the real challenge isn't, to me, about whether Gallows Circus, you might not want to hear this, but whether they become a million-selling band, or whether it's Black Tree Vultures or Blitz. You know, I think the problem is that none of them will. And I don't think any of the bands that are in rock now will either. The new bands, even the ones that are supposedly making it now. They won't, because it's too niche a market. Now is, I believe in my 60 years, so let's say I've been listening to music for 45 of them and really knowing what I was doing. The bands just now are better than ever. There's more of them. There's better music than I've ever heard. The problem is the market's too small for it. And until we actually start trying to smash that ceiling and trying to break into and attract a young audience. You know, I'm sick of going to gigs and I'm one of the younger ones there and I'm 60, for God's sake. You know, and it's like, and I'm not knocking anybody. You know, I'm as passionate about music now as I've ever been at my age. You know, I'm not knocking it at all. But the problem is that if we want rock and metal to succeed, then we're going to have to start thinking differently. And we have to, that's why, and it's people like, I've been talking to Alec McKechnie, you know, Crazy Cowboy, and quite a few others about this, and obviously Adam from MMH, I had discussions with him as well, and it's about this next gen rock. We need to grow this marketplace. We need to get kids, because I'll tell you what, the things that made me want to be in a rock band at 15-year-old or 14-year-old, the only difference is now the youngsters aren't seeing those type of bands. They're not hearing them because it's not easily and readily available. And that's a challenge for us all.
100% agree. For the record, I've seen Gallows Circus a couple of times live and they're amazing. So,
a superb band. Well, to be fair, I picked them for a reason, because they're a band that should be huge. They actually, I truly believe they should be huge. You know, but I'm talking about bands like those Damn Crows. I'm talking about Bad Touch. I'm talking about, you know, Guerrilla Riot. They all should be huge. It should. I just wish to Christ we could have moved them all back to the big festivals in the 70s and 80s, because these bands would have made a fortune. But there's nothing to say we can't recreate it. But we're not going to recreate it by living in the past and trying to do everything the same way. And that's what Brad Maher's podcast was about today. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. And don't get me wrong, I listened to that and I've been making mistakes as well because of how I've been thinking about it. So I'm only being smart after the fact, but you know, I know it needs to be done, and there's a few who know it needs to be done, but it won't be done while everybody just keeps on doing the same old.
So finally, where can people find out online what you're doing and everything that's happening with Forge?
The best thing to do is to go into the website, which is www.theforgemusicgroup.com. all lowercase. So it's The Forge Music Group, or in Facebook, obviously we've got Forge AMP, we've got Forge and Fire Promotions. We're on all of them, but if you go to the website, that you can get to anywhere off of that, and everything that we do has got its own page, and you can link to that. You can find the bands, you can even go into them, and you can get to their Facebook pages, their Instagram, etc. But they've also all got their own Spotify playlist that you can bring up their best 5 tracks or most recent 5 tracks. So it's all on there, really. And
all those links, I'm going to try and surmise them all, will be in the show notes of this episode. So if you are listening, you can just click on them away. Included in the show notes will be a link to the Scouser and the Scot. And I've got to say, if you enjoy this podcast, you will enjoy Scouser and the Scot. It's on a very similar sort of theme. So, John, thanks for being on the episode.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me on, because I think that guys like you doing this kind of thing, it adds up. When you listen back to you listen to what we've just been talking about, it's people like you doing this that's going to help us to break that ceiling. So thanks very much, Phil.
So that's it for another episode of the Music Survival Guide. I thought that John had a lot of really good, valuable information to share in there. If you agree, share it with your friends, let them know about it, let them hear what John had to say. Please give me a review if you can, wherever you listen to the podcast. Even if it's just some stars, I would love it. And I will see you next time.